we have the robot working, so nobody worry about losing job because we don't have to work. Yeah, that's true communism. I would say cyber communism.
Yeah. Welcome to Overlap, brought to you by Breakthrough News and Wave Media. My name is Belinda Li. I am an AI researcher at MIT. I'm excited to be joined by Lingwei Zhou, Chief Science Editor at China Academy from China.
Thank you, Belinda.
Yeah. So there has been a lot of fear in the US about the development of AI, and I'm curious to know what the conversations in China have been about the topic. Are people in China afraid of the rapid changes in technology?
Yeah, afraid, but mostly excited and curious about what you can do next. And actually, well, here's another thing about China, because the like of GPT and many things, language models developed in the US is not available in China. Most Chinese just don't have the access. So for the most tech savvy population of the Chinese, they get a taste of that, so they are quite impressed, and of course they're worried about their job. I think there's the same thing across the world. And also, despite Chinese firms have developed a lot of similar language models, by one account there's like 30 language models launched by Chinese firms, but most of them are just at the stage of internal testing. So just ordinary people just can't have access of that. So actually, maybe in the future when everyone can use it, they have they should have a different attitude toward the new technology. Of course, people are worried because in China, I think the first victim are the gaming industry, because many game companies making computer games, they just lay off those illustrators. They use AI to create image, so they can shrink the team of their graphic designer, illustrator from usually they used to have 10 people. Now they just use three people to work in the graphic design team. So yeah, of course, that's a real threat to the jobs. But another thing is, I think it's a key difference between Chinese and the US is that we have normally have a higher trust on our government, so we don't really worry about they use AI to watch us. We feel it may be safer for us if they use that in the civilian cameras. So yeah, that's generally very different sentiment to the police, to the government. So it's quite So on the job side, I think we share the concerns of the Americans. Yeah, like I said moments ago, because not many people have used that, have tried the GPT yet. So that just doesn't have just didn't create such strong public opinion against it. So maybe as time goes by, maybe there will be stronger sentiment, among the society as a whole.
Yeah, so I think these corporations as well, there's another possible fear is, these corporations right now, especially among researchers like myself, these OpenAI, for example, a lot of these corporations are kind of consolidating, the technologies within these corporations. So you can see they also get to decide who gets access and who doesn't, and kind of, how these models are trained. And so right now, only OpenAI and then Google, and then I assume some Baidu as well has these resources to train these technologies. But in the US, for example, that makes it so that very few, these very few powerful corporations get to control both the direction of research and also how these technologies are built. And OpenAI, for example, has decided not to release any source code. Really, they should be called closed AI, because they started the precedent of not releasing source code and not releasing just any papers or any details about their model, about their training data. There's complete lack of transparency there. So there's
Elon
a lot of fear.
Musk made the point too. I think
Sorry,
Elon
what?
Musk Well, as Elon Musk once said that too. He said like OpenAI just no longer open anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, Elon Musk obviously has his own agenda, but like, so in many ways, it's like hampers both, as researchers, our ability to like build new technologies, and like, the way that we can innovate is like we really depend on these companies to like whatever they can give us, like we depend on them. So there's fears among researchers there, but also there's fears among like, how do we even regulate these technologies if they're not like being transparent about how they're training their models, and like, what is going into their models, and like how they're being built, and even like how big these models are. Like, we know absolutely nothing. So like, it's hard also to, on the safety side, like regulate it from like, the researchers can't really, regulate these models either.
The landscape in China could be more quite different because the market is more fragmented. Yeah, like I say, we have like 30-something companies are doing the same thing. I think one of the big reasons for this is the limit of computing power. So because, as we all know, large models require the high performance GPU to do that. But as a result of the US embargo on China of the GPUs, we just don't have that computing power. So instead, many companies, they opt for training smaller models doing more specific tasks. So it's not like going to like OpenAI. They can monopolize the whole market. So they were, I think, the company like Alibaba, well, they're the biggest, but they still try to integrate their technology into some specific manufacturing industry area to do that. It's quite smaller model. So we don't have right now, we don't have the worry about, well, one company, two company can just monopolize the whole market. And also, of course, we all know that in the last few years, those big tech companies in China are highly regulated by the government already. So we know government will come out on top because, well, it's quite different culture here. So I think China, people see this as quite a big opportunity because it will make the machine smarter. So, we're quite into manufacturing. So maybe you could upgrade our manufacturing. So people see it more like an opportunity than a threat. Actually, Chinese government, well, one of the agencies have released a draft about regulations. They just ask for comments from the industry. But, well, they set the guidance framework. They just say very basic things, say, well, it should align to our interests. It shouldn't threat our national security. They should have to the things and technology to serve the people. And I think they basically embrace it with an open mind. But of course, they are quite aware of the threat. Actually, well, because China now is doing catch up to the US in this. So I think they hesitate to overregulate that because that will stifle the innovation. So, well, I think in the US could be similar. I mean, in the normal context, maybe they want to regulate this, but in the context of the China-US competition in technology, they might be hesitate to overregulate it too. So they want their technology to get ahead, to stay ahead forever. So but in China, I also see the government release a guidance on the robotic industry. They say the AI should be incorporated into the robotic industry, and they see the robotic industry as the next car industry. As we know, China have a success in the EV industry, and because the car industry have a very long supply chain, so it could leave all the boats. And they hope the robotic industry will do the same to Chinese industries because, well, it involves a lot of like manufacturer for the material, for the chips, for the softwares. So it could be very strategic. So I think robotic and AI put together, we see that, well, they try to have a strategy in this so-called the fourth industrial revolution. It just can't afford to be lag behind in this. You see, right now the large language models are, well, they all stay in the computer, right? They have to connect to the physical world via those Internet of Things gadgets, via robotics. And I think that's the future that will take a lot of employment. So, because you see, if you just develop a software, you just need a certain company to do that, like Microsoft, like Google, they already do that. But in terms of designing a robot to serve the people, like service robot, like industrial robots, each scenario, each application are very specific. They may need extra more engineers to do that. So that may, well, take more employment. And we see this as opportunity. So, but yeah, and this leads to another point I want to make, because in China, we value education very much. So many parents are just nervous. They're always nervous. Well, tiger moms, tiger dad, like that. But well, they're asking questions. What should we teach our kids so they can have a job in 10 years or in 20 years? Because in China, all the students just immerse themselves in study and doing math all the time, learning languages. But with the AI, they're getting stronger, getting better by the matter of the day. We have to ask, should we change the way we teach our students, we teach our kids? Not just to recite those things, not just to do to solve the math problem, because AI could do that, obviously. So the next thing is we're thinking about maybe we should teach something more, teach them to be more creative. But yeah, to being creative, everyone will say they need to be creative, but specifically how? So we will see. Because I'm at the same time educator. I designing curriculum for young kids. To do the STEAM project, so to solve real life problems. So the educators in China, we're thinking about it. Some of us were thinking about maybe robotics is the area, and we can expand it. So and there's another trend in China, because we have an aging population. So for the first time in recent history, we have a shrinking population. Last year, the birth rate is down. So, well, I'm thinking about maybe in 20 years, I'm going to retire, but who's going to take care of me? Maybe robots. Maybe we just look our neighbor, like Japan. I think they're trying to do that for a long time to develop all kinds of robots. But now we have those AIs, language model, make the robot smarter. So maybe, with the advance of the robotic technology, they can do a lot of service to people, to the elderly. Is quite a big market opportunity for that, and also solve our problem. So on one hand is education for the kids, and on another hand is for the elderly. So we see this as pillars of our society, because we have those family culture. We have to take care of the kids and the elderly. So maybe, well, who knows?
That sounds great. Yeah, it sounds like definitely, in China, there's, everyone feels like they could kind of collectively benefit from this technology. Yeah, it just feels like this is a really great opportunity to can harness the power of this technology to actually see benefits to the people. But in the US, a lot of these powerful people, like Sam Altman, Elon Musk, are also pushing this narrative as well of look, we can kind of revolutionize the way we do a lot of things. But there's also a lot of anxiety as well from just normal workers about who does this actually really benefit? Even despite that, already we see that for example, BuzzFeed is trying to replace journalists with AI and firing a bunch of human journalists in favor of AI. We see in the Writers Guild, right? They're currently striking because one of the core demands is that humans writers should not be replaced by AI. So already corporations are thinking of many creative ways to try and leverage, these large language models, these existing AI technologies to replace human workers. And among that, we see lots of people having fears around their jobs being replaced. But also there's people who are concerned about the consequences of, what these technologies could have when released to the public. Like there's the potential for these technologies to be used to create deep fakes. You can have you can put an image of a person and like have them say something that they totally did not say, and like people would not be able to tell the difference. These technologies could be leveraged for producing large amounts of fake news and misinformation. In the education sector, there's a big concern around plagiarism and kind of the consequences of having these large language models, and like if you have a writing assignment or a coding assignment, even like how do you make sure that the student didn't just generate it from GPT-4 or GPT-3, and a lot of artists also like have concerns around copyright. Artists need to produce these works to like survive, right? And if we have these AI artists that like can produce in less than 1 second like a great piece of art, then artists are under like threat of being replaced. Already we see in the US like there's an intensifying like homelessness crisis. As unemployment increases, this crisis will just intensify. Now, I guess what I want to kind of speak to is also like the funding sources for OpenAI and these big tech companies, and also like how these technologies really were built. So OpenAI started kind of as a nonprofit. Essentially, like they had this grandiose mission of very much speaking to like what is being currently felt in China right now, but like they put it as their message to like, we want to build technologies that benefit all of humanity, and we're not beholden to like stakeholders or anyone else that like wants to profit from this. But now 6 years later, we see that they're actually a for-profit company, and they're very closely partnered with Microsoft. So it seems like there's this different image between like what they're trying to put out and also versus what their actions concretely are. And so with OpenAI, with OpenAI especially, Microsoft invested a large sum of money into these technologies. But also like when they built these technologies, it was, these technologies like large language models, they are trained from large amounts of text on the internet, large amounts of books, ebook sizes on the internet, like Wikipedia text, and also like, news articles that were written by journalists. So essentially it's like, taking a large amount of kind of unpaid labor that people have put out on the internet, and harnessing that to like train the model. And really what these models are built off of is like this unpaid labor. And on the other hand, outsourcing like a lot of labeling effort to other countries, and paying people very low wages to do that labeling for them. So there was like that Times article about how OpenAI used Kenyan workers to kind of rate whether or not like this training data is toxic or not, and whether or not we want to include it in the pre-training data for a language model. And they paid them only like $2 an hour. So basically like these technologies themselves are kind of being built off the backs of either unpaid or low wage labor. And then after that, like they're being used to try and replace the same workers whose work came in to like actually build these technologies. And also we see as well, like it's built off of the labor of a lot of researchers as well, because before OpenAI, a lot of research, actually almost all of research in the field was open source. It was like all the code was released, the whole training data, the entire papers are released. But OpenAI, started this trend of like closing off models. So essentially, they're also building off of decades of open source research, and then privatizing that. Once again, like we see that dynamic between like, kind of this ruling class power, these powerful corporations trying to use and monopolize like technologies that should, were built off the backs of all of us and should be going to benefit all of us.
Yeah, but one thing different in China because is that most of the data are already owned by those the company platforms, like the platforms of Alibaba. and those potential. So it's already owned by those platforms. It's not quite open to anyone. So it creates problems, yeah, because only those companies, they have enough data to train their model. And this is one thing. And another thing is open source movement is not quite big in China, like in the US. So we don't. So the start point is quite different. So we never have that openly available massive amount of data to train the language model. So we kind of know from the beginning those things are owned by the companies, owned by the private firms. So yeah, of course, as they grow stronger, we may have the similar problem like the US. And also, as you mentioned, all those open source movement.
It's not quite big in China, like in the US. So yeah, so we don't have the similar problem to start from the beginning. Yeah, and I think another thing is the ownership of those AIs. Maybe we have to figure out a better ownership. I think, yeah, in China it's the same thing, just owned by the private companies. So maybe in the future, well, we should have a different ownership structure. So like, well, owned by the people, really owned by the people, and so that those things, the AIs and the machines, can work for everyone. And yeah, it sounds like, well, the true socialist states, and well, and maybe even a welfare state. So we have a robot working, so nobody worry about losing job because we don't have to work. That could be a bright future. Just I don't know how to achieve it. Yeah, because in China there's a new study. The scientists using GPT-4 as a membrane scientist. That is the scientist that design experiment. So they use GPT-4 to design experiment. Yeah, it's fine. He can do that. Design a biology experiment, and he designed the experiment. He posed the hypothesis, design experiment, and analyze data, draw conclusions, and write the code to formulate the model for that study. So he can do the full package of things. So even the scientists could lose their job. So maybe the AI scientists may be the last one to lose their job for their own project. As to those ethical problems, like, well, AI making fake stuff, fake videos, I think we can use fight fire with fire. Just use AI to do that. Such thing like a GPT-0 which can spot the text written by AI. So the AI could spot that, could find out that. So maybe it's just a competition between technology, between different AIs. We can use AI to fight AI. I mean, yeah. And also now we have some open source language models. Maybe everyone with technology, with the know-how, the knowledge, can train their models. Maybe can, well, just make things better. And another thing is, well, I talk about that the collective ownership. Actually, in China, we have a pilot project about that, but just with the solar panel, with solar powers. Like they built a solar power farm in a village, and they register a company that own the solar farm, and the revenue all goes to the villagers. So basically, all the villagers are the shareholder of this company, so everyone can benefit. So maybe, well, with AI, we can have like AI power factory that's, well, everyone in the village or in the community could be the shareholder, just like this pilot project in China. Yeah, they have this pilot project in the Western China. So yeah, so maybe, who knows?
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Well, that's true communism.
Yeah,
I would say cyber communism.
Yeah. Like I feel like it's definitely just, a function of like the society and like kind of the government and the political situation. Like these technologies, solar panels and AI like have just so much ability to be used for good, right? Like they could lead to like this brighter future. But like, yeah, it's like a function of like, you know, really who gets to say like how these technologies are deployed. Are they actually being used to serve the people? And that's like a function of political power and all these political questions. And
actually, our society should evolve with technology. So we have to rethink our society, maybe the structure of our society, also the structure of the firms, companies, private companies. It's not like an eternal structure. We have a company. It's just a invention of 17th century invention, the private company. So maybe at some point in the future, we have to ditch that. We have a new structure. We need to have a new structure, social structure with that, to go with that. So yeah, it's more like, well, it's like the communists will say, as the productivity grows, you need to have a different superstructure. Yeah, I mean that means the social structure, right? So maybe at some point we're approaching that point, maybe.
Yeah, I totally agree. You spoke to this a little bit previously, but like, you know, there's a competition right now between the US and China. Data and information is not being shared across this gap. And like, just imagine like the innovative power of like, if we could have like a more collaborative relationship, you know, we have all the people, like, you know, we're, you know, the same, right? Like we have shared interests, we have like shared common goals, etc. But like, yeah, like under like this capitalist framework, right? Like we have this competitive relationship between companies, this competitive relationship across nations, especially, you know, given that the US has this like very, you know, capitalist mindset, and China is like, you know, more socialist country. But like if we are able to like leverage the power of like the people in both the US and China, like, you know, I think obviously that would lead to like a much greater rate of innovation than we already have now. A lot of the fears that people have in the US around this technology really are just like, you know, fears about capitalism, right? Like fears about losing their jobs, fears about, you know, misinformation and fake news and how like these things are being deployed. Like that's not being decided democratically. That's just being decided by like, you know, whatever is most profitable. So a lot of these fears are driven by capitalism and not by like the technology itself. To really get to that point where like we no longer have those fears, like we would have to see a change in the social structure. And it would take, you know, all of us as people, you know, uniting to really get to that point. Either way, I think we're gonna have to leave it there. There's so much more we can discuss, but that's for another time. Thanks for watching Overlap, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.